half out. But I want to be clear. What I am proposing cannot mean membership of the single market.
But, she said, Britain would push for the freest possible trade with European countries and other nations around the world. For the first time, Mrs May confirmed that the British Parliament would get to vote on the final deal at the end of the negotiations. Sitting in the audience were some of the ambassadors to the UK. Mrs May emphasised she didn't want to undermine the EU, but she also warned against those who wanted to see the UK punished for voting to leave.
While I am sure a positive agreement can be reached, I am equally clear that no deal for Britain is better than a bad deal for Britain.
The opposition Labour Party said that Mrs May wanted to leave the single market, yet still have access to it. That, they said, was like having your cake and eating it, and they warned against her negotiating position.
Throughout the speech, there seemed to be an implied threat that somewhere along the line, if all her optimism of a deal with the European Union didn't work, we would move into a low-tax corporate taxation bargain basement economy on the offshores of Europe.
That clarifies it all.
And that implication of a warning was picked up by the European Parliament's chief negotiator on Brexit.
I don't think we're going to make a lot of progress if this has to happen under threat, because so saying, okay, if our European counterparts don't accept it, we're going to make from Britain a sort of a free zone or a tax haven. I don't think that is very helpful. It creates also an illusion, the illusion that you can go out of the single market, that you can go out of the customs union, and that you can cherry pick, that you can have still a number of advantages. And yeah, I think that this will not happen.
The German Foreign Minister, Frank-Walter Steinmeier, said at least the British position was now much clearer, a sentiment echoed in the Irish Parliament.
I welcome the statement today in that it brings clarity in a number of areas. This is the start of the process now. Europe is now going to have to respond to the statement made by the Prime Minister today.
And that response is only just beginning. The tough negotiations will take many years. Andy Moore, BBC News.
Well, Sylvie Goulard is a French member of the European Parliament who favours close ties between European countries. Sylvie Goulard, welcome. We know you have to go and vote very shortly, so we appreciate your time. First of all, what do you make of what you heard today?
Mrs May tries to be friendly, but I observe two things. First of all, there is a threat not to have a deal, which would mean 50 to 60 billion unpaid bill for the European Union. We have to be aware of that. And the second thing is that, of course, I wonder if she realized that the single market was the greatest achievement of the UK in the EU. And also to be half in, half out was never offered. It was always the thing the British diplomats wanted to achieve in Europe. So it's just a big shift in the position of the UK compared with the past. I'm a little bit surprised that people call this clarity.
Given what you say and what other people there in the EU will be thinking, how near to achieving what Theresa May has said today do you think Britain will get? How achievable is it?
Well, if you really want to achieve that, you leave the single market, that you have no custom union, that you don't recognize the jurisdiction of the Court of Justice, to a certain extent it will be quicker, because we did not intend to give half membership. But on the other hand, I wonder if one day people will not wake up in the UK and realize the price to pay for it. Of course you can do this, but how much are you ready really to pay for that? And it's not something that is so easy. And once again, there is something missing in Mrs May's speech, which is that the UK should be responsible for all the credits, for example, the guarantees of the credit it benefited in the UK from the European Investment Bank. We are ready to continue, but then the guarantee should be in the hands of the UK, or they have to pay the bill. And on this, she said nothing.
So when Theresa May says that no deal for Britain is better than a bad deal for Britain, do you believe her? I mean, do you believe that Britain needs the EU less than the EU needs Britain?
No, I don't think so. We are all interdependent. And of course, we perfectly know that at the beginning of negotiation, people are bluffing a little bit. But once again, I cannot imagine that the UK is leaving the EU with no deal, and at the same time, we remain close partners in NATO and for intelligence and for fighting against terrorism. Let's be very serious on that. There is a common threat for the Western world. We have to be very close, so it requires that we are reasonable on the other side.
I don't know why, though, you would necessarily connect the single market idea with cooperation and collaboration against a terrorist threat. Why those should be linked? This is all one common cause, surely.
No, I agree with you from a logical point of view, but from a political point of view, no deal would mean, I insist, billions unpaid commitment from the UK for the partners. I'm not sure it's the best way to have a friendly relationship in the future. And I cannot imagine that the UK is not going to respect the previous commitments on the divorce. Of course, I'm not talking about the future.
Given all these reservations, which many others may share where you are, how long do you expect this divorce process to take?
According to the treaty, we only have 2 years to negotiate, sign and ratify on both sides, which is very short. Then this is for the divorce agreement. To rebuild a new relationship, above all, if it is a full-fledged trade agreement, it will require years. What the former ambassador to the UK said was a matter of fact. He was criticized in the UK, but the experience of all trade deals we have made in the past confirms that it will take years.
Sylvie Goulard, we appreciate your time. We will let you go back into the chamber and cast your vote. Thank you very much for joining us there, French MEP from Strasbourg. Well, let's talk to our political correspondent, Rob Watson. Rob, how close do you think we are to clarity on what might happen with Brexit now?
Well, I think we're certainly a lot closer to clarity on what Theresa May would like. And actually, if you strip away a lot of the rhetoric from the speech, it comes down to this. Theresa May is essentially like saying that Britain would like all the things that it likes about the European Union, such as free trade, cooperation over security and law enforcement, and that it doesn't want any of the things that it doesn't like, such as being part of a supranational political entity like the European Union, paying money into it, and having the freedom of movement. So, of course, that raises these two huge questions. What will the other EU 27 make of that position? Will they be prepared to meet it all the way, half the way, some of the way? And I think absolutely crucially, what will the international banks, international businesses, the vast majority of whom were very much against Brexit, what will they make of what Theresa May has said today? Because I think she has made it really, really clear what she wants. The question is, can it work?
And we heard this from Theresa May, Rob, that she's prepared to walk away with nothing. I mean, what would actually that look like, just walking out of the negotiations?
Well, of course, what her opponents say is that would be pretty catastrophic if it really came to it, because it would mean instead of free trade, absolutely borderless trade with a current single market of 500 million customers, you would have to operate on the basis of tariffs. And of course, there's no doubt that the Prime Minister wants to avoid that, but I think that she also felt that it was important that, unlike David Cameron, that she should be prepared to be seen to be willing to walk away from the deal. But I think those who thought maybe it wasn't going to be a hard Brexit, maybe it would be a soft, maybe it would be whatever it was going to be, I mean, it is pretty clear that she really does mean a clean break with the European Union, and what she wants to put in its place is essentially a trade relationship and then one of cooperation over issues of diplomacy and security.
Rob, what sort of timescale might we be talking about realistically?
Well, Theresa May wants to get this process underway in 2 years. In other words, to have the shape of the deal done. And then, of course, she's allowed for the possibility of a transition period. In other words, she reaches an agreement. There's some form of free trade, some form of customs arrangement between Britain and the European Union. But it doesn't actually come into force immediately to enable businesses and border guards and whatever to adjust to it. But I think really, you know, to step back from all of this, and it has been a truly dramatic day, there's no doubt about this. It feels like a page is being turned in the extraordinarily long and sometimes complex history between Britain and continental Europe. The real test is going to be, you know, how does the British economy perform? Because while I think it's perfectly true that Theresa May is pretty much unassailable politically in this country, she remains fairly popular with the voters, the real test will be, is it going to work out economically?
Rob, thanks very much. Rob Watson there in central London. A fighter jet on a mission against Boko Haram extremists has mistakenly bombed civilians, killing many refugees and aid workers. The incident happened in Ran in Nigeria, in the far north of Borno State. It's thought 3 of the kidnapped Chibok girls were among those killed. With me is our correspondent, Chris Iwoka. Chris, what details are emerging?
Well, first, we're understanding that from a statement released by MSF, Médecins Sans Frontières, that 52 people were killed, about 120 others were injured, and it was an IDP camp in Ran.
Internally displaced people.
Internally displaced people, and this was close to the border with Cameroon, but in Nigeria, in Borno State. According to the MSF too, they are saying that 6 of their own staff, that is Médecins Sans Frontières, 6 of their own staff were also killed in the bombing. And the Nigerian military have been talking to journalists. First, they said that it was a mistake. They had information that Boko Haram militants were gathering in the area, and so based on the information they got, they set the joint bombers and then they bombed the place. Unfortunately, they discovered that it was accidentally killing innocent, civilian people, not Boko Haram people. And the president of Nigeria has also expressed concern, and he said it was a regrettable operational mistake. So, but the army has said this is the first time that this mistake has occurred in their operations in trying to clear the northeast of Boko Haram militants.
Chris, thank you very much for the update. Chris Iwoka. Turkey says a man arrested in Istanbul last night has admitted carrying out the nightclub attack on New Year's Eve that killed 39 people. The suspect's been named as Abdulkadir Masharipov, a 34-year-old from Uzbekistan who was allegedly trained in Afghanistan. 2 guns, 2 drones and $200,000 US were also seized. Mark Lowen reports.
A late-night raid to catch Turkey's most wanted. Police swooped on an Istanbul suburb after a massive manhunt, making several arrests. And finally, they got him. Abdulkadir Masharipov, a 34-year-old Uzbek who police say has confessed to the nightclub attack, bruised but alive. On the run for over 2 weeks, he was found in an apartment in a western suburb of Istanbul, detained with 4 others.
Abdulkadir Masharipov.
The city's governor said the gunman had entered Turkey illegally a year ago, spoke 4 languages and was trained in Afghanistan, adding he clearly acted on behalf of so-called Islamic State. Questions now will focus on any accomplices he may have had and links to IS cells here. If he talks, he could lead police to others. The New Year's Eve attack was swift and deadly. It took just 7 minutes for him to shoot his way into Istanbul's Reyna nightclub, firing 180 bullets inside. Most of the 39 people killed were Arab tourists. Others jumped into the freezing Bosphorus to escape.
Capturing the man who brought horror to this nightclub will be a huge relief and could be a valuable asset. It's the first time the authorities have caught alive an IS suspect who carried out an attack. But the real challenge now is how to secure Turkey, to step up intelligence and halt the wave of terror that has engulfed this country. Mark Lowen, BBC News, Istanbul.
Now a look at some of the day's other news, and an inquest has heard how concerns over security at a Tunisian holiday resort where 30 Britons were killed by an Islamist gunman in June 2015 were raised 6 months before the attack took place. A report in January 2015 for the British government suggested there was a low standard of protection at some hotel entrances in the area of Sousse. Yet more unrest in Brazil's prisons. 26 people are now confirmed to have died in rioting at the weekend, while a new uprising has been taking place in the northeast of the country. President Michel Temer has said his country will aim to build at least 30 new jails this year in an effort to stop overcrowding, one of the major causes of the riots. The search for a Malaysian airliner that vanished 3 years ago with 239 people on board has been called off. An underwater search for debris from flight MH370 has failed to discover a significant amount of wreckage. The families of those on board say the decision to stop searching is irresponsible. The plane disappeared on its way from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing after turning off course. Vladimir Putin has dismissed allegations that Russia had gathered compromising material on Donald Trump as total nonsense. The Russian president said the leaked information which appeared last week in the US media was an obvious fake.
First of all, he is a grown-up man. And secondly, he is a person who has been organising beauty contests for many years, who communicated with the most beautiful women in the world. You know, I can hardly imagine that he went to the hotel to meet with our girls of reduced social responsibility. Undoubtedly, my girls are the best in the world, of course, but I doubt Mr. Trump took this bait. And people who order such fakes, which are now being spread against a new president of the United States, they fabricate them and use them in the political race, they are worse than prostitutes. They do not have any moral limits.
Wow. One of Donald Trump's closest advisors had told the BBC that the US would win a trade war with China. Anthony Scaramucci had added that the current trade relationship was more favourable to China than the US, but in one town in America's Rust Belt. It's a company with roots in China that's actually creating jobs. Laura Trevelyan has been to take a look.
This is Donald Trump's America now, Moraine, Ohio. Like so many small towns across the nation, he won here with a promise to bring back jobs. Somewhat surprisingly, though, the factory down the road is run by a company with its headquarters in China. Fuyao Glass has moved into a plant General Motors closed down, making windshields where cars once rolled off the assembly line.
On this Ohio factory floor, Donald Trump's anti-globalization campaign rhetoric meets the reality. This Chinese-managed company is determined to become the biggest manufacturer of car windshields in the world.
Our goal, obviously, become number one. And to be able to achieve that goal, obviously, you have to combine all the resource, the manpower. So I believe we have to have a 2 foot, one in China, one in US.
Fuyao's putting its money where its mouth is, investing millions of dollars on the Moraine plant. While many of the managers are Chinese, more than 2,000 jobs have been created locally.
Okay, I'll deal with it when I get done here.
Scott used to work for General Motors, and he's still grappling with the cultural differences.
We have to find some common ground on what kind of, what our goals are, our goals and our standards. There's a lot of different things that you don't necessarily see here that you would in an established American company.
For Tonya, who saw the community suffer when the GM plant closed, it doesn't matter that Fuyao is paying people less.
I believe the wages will go up once it's more profitable. Those profits will be shared with our associates.
Experts say this is the future, Chinese expansion into the US market.
This is a country which has rapidly been increasing its manufactured exports to the United States. It's trying to move from just being an assembly plant to actually getting involved in the distribution system, getting closer to the customers. And the question is, can they penetrate deeper into the American market?
However, Donald Trump's threatened to impose tariffs on Chinese imports, and his rhetoric against China is heated. Jeff Liu says he's not worried.
We don't really talk about the politics, we talk about the family, we talk about the local people, the US and China. This is we call to try to follow what we call the American dream.
The American dream's taken a hit at the local tavern, though, where there's nostalgia for the GM days when business was brisk.
I would have 3 people around the bar, had 2 or 3 waitresses working, and now just one person works during the day. It's very slow.
But Tammy's regulars say thanks to Fuyao, things are picking up.
You're welcome.
My son's working there. He's building the catwalks and stuff inside the place.
A lot of my friends work there,
and that don't get.
The Trump supporters around this bar and across the nation hope the next president will bring business back to their communities. They may be surprised that China's now creating manufacturing jobs, but a paycheck is better than none. Laura Trevelyan, BBC News, Ohio.
Now, we know Donald Trump is a prolific user of Twitter. One of his latest messages was meant to be in praise of his daughter Ivanka, but what a difference a space makes when you type. This is the Twitter feed of the daughter of the president-elect, but because of a simple typing error, he actually directed people to here, to the Twitter feed of a different Ivanka. This one lives in Brighton on the south coast of the UK, and the mistake went viral. Well, we can now speak to Ivanka Maic, who joins us now from Brighton. Ivanka, welcome to you. Thrown into the spotlight, tell us what happened when you realised the next president of the United States had mentioned you in a tweet.
Well, I woke up this morning to find that my husband had received a text message asking me to appear on ITV News. So I, in relationship to this tweet, so I quickly went downstairs to find my phone, only to find that my notifications had gone beyond being able to be counted. So yes, it has been quite a surreal day. Not quite what I expected, and not what I had planned.
Yes,
there you go.
What did you then do? You don't particularly share the same politics as Donald Trump, do you? You're involved with the Labour Party here in the UK, but you decided to give him some advice.
Well, I thought it's one of those moments in life where you have an opportunity to say something that some people may read or listen to. And rather, yes, you're absolutely right, my politics couldn't be further from Donald Trump's. However, I thought climate change is something that everybody could agree with, is a big problem and a big concern, regardless of their position on the political spectrum. So I thought, well, if I find something, I quickly searched for an article that had a good infographic. So I thought if it's going to get picked up, I should have something that looks good and is informative. And I went with my climate change tweet.
Right, so you said that he should spend less time on Twitter, or more care on Twitter, and more time learning about climate change.
I nearly said less time on Twitter, but then as my sister pointed out, that's where the action was. So to advise him to not spend time on Twitter would probably be a bit sort of counterintuitive in this situation. So we went for more care on Twitter rather than less time.
And did you get any response from him directly, or was this just response from everybody else who was now watching this conversation?
There's been lots of responses, but none that I've noticed from Donald Trump. But I would hardly expect a man with his impending job to have time to respond to my tweet.
Now, it's not the first time that you have been mixed up, at least in social media terms, with Ivanka Trump.
It is not. No, it's been happening for quite a while. Obviously, I've been on Twitter for quite a while. I'm a little older than Ivanka Trump, so I got there first, and I picked up @Ivanka, which is a very common Slavic name. When I set up the account, I didn't even think that there would be a time when I'd be, @Ivanka Trump's father would be running for president. So I just went with my name, and here we are. So, over the last few years, as many times I've been confused with Ivanka Trump. Well, it's not really confused. Like Mr. Trump himself, people often put the space in, and then things end up on my feed. But also, that she's not the only person I get confused with. There's also a Hungarian concrete design.
Ivanka, just before we come to the end of the programme, how many followers did you gain in the last day?
Something like 6,000.
Thank you very much. Ivanka Maic from Brighton, we appreciate your time. Thanks very much for talking to us here on BBC World News. Don't forget, you can get in touch with me and some of the team on Twitter. I'm @KarenBBC. Thanks very much for watching BBC World News today. I'm Karen Giannoni here in London.